So say you found a skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent 89, 16 Kentles, the Benthoven birthday special, because while today isn't technically Benthoven's birthday, tomorrow is, and we figured, you know what, rather than trying to rearrange a schedule or add in an extra stream or something, today we're just going to celebrate,
I did
and there you go.
try to get the world's government to change today into tomorrow, but they don't exist, so
Oh,
it didn't go anywhere.
Did
Also, I
you-
didn't actually try. I
did you
just
check?
thought of it right now.
Oh, just now? I was going to say, if you check with the Masons, maybe they could get it done.
I'll
You
check everyone I know named Mason.
There you go. All right,
I
guys.
don't know anybody named Mason.
So this is the start of a new video. This is CSE 201 Class 8. I actually don't have a class title for this one. So I guess whatever Kent talks about is fair game. We don't get to like poke at him for like, hey Kent, remember when this talk was supposed to be about? Because I don't have one of those. The first thing we want to
stick with the last one. Does evolution and the Bible conflict or something like that?
Yeah, like is the Bible compatible with evolution? I think was the title of that one, and it like never came up in the entire like hour and 15 minutes or so. Yeah, that was pretty crazy. So guys, we'll go over the rules because this is a drinking game that you don't have to play, as well as we'll go over what's on the screen right now because it's interesting.
Kind of sad actually.
First, what are you drinking, Ben?
I have this chamomile tea in this mug. It's designed to help with my anxiety.
Nice.
And then I have grape flavored decaffeinated black tea over ice.
Awesome.
Which, I don't know, tastes good. And is less filling.
Well, I have a... So, some of you guys might know, I've been a little bit under the weather the last week or so. In fact, a couple days, I basically just didn't get out of bed or eat. There was like a period where like I could count out 48 hours, and in that I'd had under 1,000 calories. Just because I just wasn't eating at all. So I'm taking it a little bit easy today. So my drink right now is a blackberry White Claw, but because it is the first drink, and I want to make sure that, you know, we get this started off right, I did add about 2 fingers of vodka to the bottom of the glass before I poured it in there. So it's a little bit of a spiked blackberry White Claw,
Yeah,
but from then on, it's just going to be normal White Claws. Just because I feel like if I'm already under the weather, the last thing I need is to do that plus be hungover the next day. Like, that just sounds like a recipe for a disaster.
Yeah.
Add a possible trip to the hospital, in fact, which I'm trying to avoid.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
Let's avoid that.
Yeah. So first, let's take a look at the drinking rules. So first, we take a drink whenever Kent Hovind says something so stupid, we just kind of have to drink. Next, we take a drink whenever Kent Hovind gets something right that isn't just a quotation from something else, right? So if he's just like, oh, and the Bible says, and he pulls up a quotation from the Bible, we're not going to drink because he was able to successfully quote the Bible. Although we might... Oh! And that is one of our random drink triggers. We drink whenever one of the kaiju come around. So let's take our first drink of the night.
Drink for Godzilla.
All right. Let's see. Bob Knott for $5 says, it's Ben's birthday. Please send strippers and illicit and or illegal drugs depending on your state laws.
I like all of those ideas. All of them.
The Dapper Dinosaur program channel and its associated persons do not condone any illicit activity.
I don't actually condone any of those either.
Including and especially...
Except for the birthday.
Well, I especially don't condone anyone going to Sci-Hub, that's SCI-HUB, Sci-Hub, to pirate scientific papers, because you can go there and pirate tens of thousands of otherwise paywalled scientific papers. That's not okay, and we don't condone that here. And remember, the place not to go is SCI-HUB. Don't go to Sci-Hub. Not okay. Really, don't go to Sci-Hub. That's where you're not supposed to go. Anyway, so yes, when Godzilla stops by, we'll take a drink. But also, You guys can trigger a Godzilla drink if you're a channel member by super chatting any amount and including one of the kaiju emojis. So we have Godzilla, we have Mothra, and we have King Ghidorah. Giant monsters all out attack. Baragon, sorry, but you were left off of the title, so you're left out of the emojis. But it was one of my favorite Goji suits. Anyway, another way that you guys, member or not, can cause a drink trigger is if any of you super chats anything to the effect that AIG are a bag of dicks, because, well, they like to copyright claim virtually everything that uses any of their footage, and it's a pain in the ass. So, they are a bag of dicks. I think I've had probably a dozen at least of my videos copyright claimed by AIG, all eventually released. But during that time, I can't make money off of them. I
Why
might
are they
not be able.
released?
Oh,
because there was no merit for their
yeah, basically.
legitimate claims?
Yeah.
Interesting. Sounds like something a dick would do.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, what else do we have? We take a drink whenever Kent Hovind tells a joke that doesn't land. Whenever Kent Hovind mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party or their leaders or various activities during the 1930s, 40s, that kind of time period. We will also take a drink whenever Kent Hovind tells a story that didn't happen, which we sometimes call shower thoughts. We'll also take a drink if one of us can successfully predict his next point where it doesn't seem clear what it's going to be. And what am I missing, Bent?
Nothing. You got all of them.
Awesome. And I didn't even have the rule list in front of me. That's just from my brain.
I always have it in front of me, and I still usually can't tell if you got them all or not.
Well,
at this time.
Before we start video, okay, so according to Kent, or whoever his editor is, and seems to fight its propagation at every turn. After this tape was produced, it was discovered that there are a few gaps in the audio portion of this presentation. We felt the information was too important to exclude, so we have subtitled the portions with bad audio. We hope this is not an inconvenience. Oh, Gupdu3 first sends a Mothra emoji, so we drink for that. And then also says, happy birthday.
Thanks.
Although severely abbreviated so as to fit into the $2 window, which
I appreciate. In the window, I get it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that effort.
Hat birth to you too, good sir. Message here on the screen. They didn't really need to put that first sentence in there.
Yeah, no. But I was actually telling... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Awkward to me.
I was actually telling Bent that similar things happened in the church that I went to as a kid, where, like, if there were any sound glitches, the first thing all the techs would do would be to pray over it. And then that never worked, so then they proceeded to actual troubleshooting.
Yeah, that kind of happened. I don't think to that degree, but, like, yeah, people would pray over the equipment and stuff. Not if it broke. Usually they would troubleshoot right away, but, like, ahead of time, maybe.
Oh, they also prayed over it ahead of time. But there were extra prayers if something went crazy.
That's just even crazier.
All right.
Why not go fix it, man? It's a loose cable. Just plug it in.
Maybe it's Satan.
Stop blaming Satan and plug your stinking mixer in.
And yeah, it almost always was just a loose connection.
All right. These things are... Okay, if you've worked with sound mixers, there's a lot of sticking cables. It can get really complicated really fast.
Yeah.
So that stuff happens a lot.
All right, here we go. Here's Kent.
All right, welcome to our class number 8 of our CSE 201. We left off last week talking about the Lost Squadron. I forgot to mention in their last week's lesson that we have a model of the Lost Squadron right in the next room here. You can see the little airplane down there and how far they had to drill to get to it. Those layers are not different ages. That's one of the lies in the textbooks. Also, they tell the kids that the layers of rock that we see in the world, the so-called geologic...
I mean, if you want to see discussion of that, just go back to the last episode of Kent with Bent. Or I guess go watch Sleep Hate Yourself That Much.
Column represents different time frames, and that is...
I lived it. I don't need to watch it. Okay, so the Cretaceous, yeah, okay, we're familiar with this. Different time frames. Let's see why that's not the case, because right now he's reporting the standard and standard science.
Simply baloney. I was taught this. I believed it as a kid. I thought, well, it's in the textbooks. It's got to be true.
I don't think he believed that as a kid. That would surprise me.
I don't know, because, like...
I don't think he's ever heard of this before until he
Well, the thing is,
I don't know. What do I
until
know?
high
He could
school,
be telling the truth.
Kent Hovind's life is basically like just a big mystery. But the thing is, that's not very unusual because he was in high school in the 70s, so he was growing up mostly in like the 60s, and like who was keeping a record of what little kids were doing in the 60s or where they were going to church or anything? No one. So we do know you're switched from an actual college to a unaccredited but not quite a diploma mill Christian school that was a young earth creationist school that basically taught literally everything he now believes. So I don't know if he had a conversion experience, when that would have been, and whether or not he was a Christian earlier. He claims to have, quote, given his life to the Lord sometime in like high school. But whether he was a creationist at that point, I don't know. It's all sort of hazy, and he doesn't get into it very much.
He does talk about it occasionally, though.
Occasionally, yeah.
I think you've said it before, where like at some point he learned something about young Earth creationism, and it sounded right to him, and that's the truth, and he's never, ever, ever abandoned that.
Yep.
Some little factoids, and that's it. Like there's no possible room for learning anymore. He's shut that part of his brain down. He's only in teaching mode.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Which is not good for science at all.
The whole geologic column is a joke. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting these rock layers.
Oh, this thing again.
Okay, so we're going to take a drink for a point that hasn't been a good point in almost 200 years, I think. Pretty sure it's about 200 years since this was a reasonable
debunked
question.
Before Uncle Kent, no relation, even learned it.
Debunked
Nice.
Almost as soon as the United States became a country. There's a very small gap of time where the United States was a country, and you could make this argument.
If you say so.
All right, so here's a drink. Okay. Hey, I feel like someone just whispered the word blackberry in another room. All right. Vishanti, who's been a member for 13 months, says, well, first sends 2 Mothra emojis, so we drink for that. And then first she yodels, which I'm not going to attempt to mimic, and then says, happy birthday, Vince.
The world's best yodeler. Well, of the people I know, she's the world's best yodeler.
Yes, she is certainly the best yodeler that I know. Oh, and there's Mothra again.
That I know.
Yeah, a lot of kaiju-themed drinks triggers. Okay, so what are these trees that Kent is talking about, and why is this something that's been debunked for like 200 years? Well, first they're called upright fossils, and they are fossils of trees in various places like swamps, and they died at some point, but they went through numerous cycles of things like flooding and seasonal inundations and things like that, that mean that they stick between various laminae. Now, a lamina, so everyone has seen a stack of books, like on a table or something, right? It's a vertical stack of books, right? Think of the stacks as strata. Each book is its own single work. It comes from a particular author or group of authors who all made it as one thing, right? We're just counting like compendia and things like that, whatever. Which I guess means we're also discounting the Bible in this example. But whatever, you guys know what I mean. Okay, well, each page within a book represents a part of that book, but each page is identifiable and separate, and they come one after the other. Think of strata like the books in this vertical stack of books. You can think of laminae like the pages of the books. Laminae are layers within strata. So what's a stratum? That's a singular. Well, stratum represents a single broad depositional environment. So if you have, say, sorry, got a little, like I said, still under the weather a little bit. If you have, say, an inland sea, then during the time the inland sea exists, it's going to lay down marine deposits. When it eventually dries up, or the sea levels recede, or whatever, it stops being a sea, and you start getting a different kind of deposit on top, well, that's a new stratum. But within the ocean deposits, you might get seasonal depositions, or you might get occasional flooding that comes in and leaves a distinct band inside that stratum. those are laminae. So these trees extend through laminae. Now, how do we know that they weren't put there by a flood? Well, there's this thing called a paleosol, which is literally ancient soil. That's what it means. Paleo, ancient, sol, or soil. Paleosol. So in these, you can find things like the preserved and fossilized roots of plants in situ. You can find pollens. You can find the petrified remains of like the organic film that is in soil. And then we see another layer of, say, flooding or inundation, and then another paleosol. So the thing about floods, though, is that they erase things like bioturbation from things like roots, as well as distinctly disturb and destroy soils, or at least mix them up so they're no longer identifiable with soil horizons. So we know for a fact that these vertical fossils, or upright fossils, are not going through strata, and they weren't deposited during a flood. So now that we know all that, let's hear Kent talk about it.
Why on earth would we teach the kids the layers are different ages?
I mean, because you can't put a book on top of another book unless the first book was there first. Generally speaking, that's how that works.
Because they are different ages.
I mean, yeah, there's that too. They just are. They demonstrably are in many ways.
I mean, how long does a dead tree stand up before it falls over?
It depends. Some trees are known to stay up for decades. It depends on what they're made of. And also, interestingly, in the period we're talking about, which is primarily Carboniferous, there were in fact no bacteria capable of eating lignin, which is the primary component of woody tissue in plants that keeps them, well, woody. So without bacteria that can digest lignin, trees actually end up lasting much, much longer than they do today. Because the reason trees tend to fall over relatively quickly today is because very quickly after they die, they're invaded by lignin-digesting fungi. That didn't happen in the Carboniferous because they hadn't evolved. So even if the answer today is a few years, in the Carboniferous, that answer is actually decades, potentially. Maybe even a century.
Is it possible for the bottom half to petrify and the top to keep growing? I mean, think about it. There's just no...
No, probably not.
I don't know who suggested that's what was happening.
As far as I know, that would be no one. Literally no one.
Possible way this can happen. We had a German TV crew here today videotaping an interview with me.
Oh, Chris Reese for $2 says AIG is a sack of O. Johnsons. Oh, sorry, sack O. Johnsons. There you go. Take a drink for that. And here we go.
And I showed them this about the geologic column. They were just like half looking at a new gate, like, everybody believes that. Yeah, you're probably right. Not everybody, but a lot of people believe it because that's what they've been taught.
I mean, okay, look, it is true that most people believe most of the things they believe because they were just taught that. Most people don't have the time or energy to investigate seriously investigate the various things that they believe, right?
Why would you be taught something in like a school?
Right. That's the real question.
Oh, wait, to learn about reality.
Right. So the question becomes, well, why do the people who who sort of like constitute the consensus of science, who wrote the papers that this current belief is based on, why do they believe it? So if you want to investigate, you check up on their reasoning. And it turns out they have excellent reasons. And I went and checked out those things so that you guys, I suppose, could take my word for it if you wanted to, but I encourage you to go check it out, right? Like, it's not actually that hard to figure out this stuff if you're interested.
Easy with Google.
Yeah, Google makes it a lot easier than it used to be.
But it's not correct. Goggins, Nova Scotia. A friend of mine called me there from there today. He's up there getting some of the petrified wood. He's going to try to get a petrified tree in the vertical position.
I mean, that'd be cool.
Get a video footage of it, and then get it removed and bring it down here for our museum. That'd be cool. Have one of those. We've got...
I mean, it would be cool, but it's not going to help any. So, good job, Kent. I think actually he ended up not getting any real vertical fossils, upright fossils. I think he just got a model.
A petrified tree right here that broken up into logs. You want a petrified tree, if it ever does get free from the dirt, it'll fall over. And it's solid rock, it's going to bust up into logs. You go to the petrified desert in forest in Arizona or Calistoga, California.
I've been there.
In there.
Or Florida, Mississippi, there are petrified forests all over America. You see oftentimes great big trees into logs.
Yep. It turns out that the material that the trees are made out of is harder than the surrounding rock because these are like matrix of the logs, whereas the softer stuff had a harder time seeping in. And then what happens at that point is that the logs end up being significantly harder than the surrounding material. So as the surrounding material erodes, which you can actually see if you go to like the petrified forest today, you can actually see bits of logs sticking out. Well, eventually what's going to happen is it's going to be sticking out and it's going to exceed the actual strength of the now very brittle but very hard rock. It's going to crack and fall and tumble somewhere. And as it tumbles, it may crack additionally. So, yeah, this is completely expected that these things are going to break up into little chunks and logs. And Science Side Up, who's been a member for 5 months at the level of Tetrapod, says, "Happy birthday" with a Godzilla emoji. So we're going to take a drink for Godzilla. And happy birthday, Bent.
Thank you.
Okay.
I feel older and wiser.
Yay.
Less wise. Yeah, older and less wise.
Okay. Well, that'll happen. All right, here we go.
They probably petrified standing up. In Cookeville, Tennessee.
Well, some of them might have petrified standing up. I'm sure some of them also petrified on their side. I don't see why not. Although it's also not a big deal because, like, who cares?
We did say he wanted to find an upright one to bring to the museum.
Drink from Mothra.
So for whatever reason, the upright tree is the one he wants in the museum, as opposed to just any old petrified tree.
Well, he wants them specifically because he's going to lie about the idea that they're going through strata instead of laminate. That's what he wants to do. He wants to say
he's not taking any strata or laminate with him. He's just wants to take the tree. Like,
well, I do believe his model. I do believe the model that he eventually had commissioned did include like fake rock layers in it. So it was
I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was just up there south of Cookeville, about 30 miles, where these trees are, in a mountain.
Okay, a mountain of several thin layers of coal seams. Not enough there to go after commercially. Oh, okay. I mean, the thing is, coal seams, right, are made from compressed plant material. So if there is, like, these were in seasonally flooded swamps, right? So most years there would be a bit of a flood. Sometimes it would be bigger and sometimes smaller. So if there's a particularly wet year and a particularly big flood comes, that's going to wash a bunch of plant material into a layer, which is then going to get covered with sediment, and that will compress likely into coal. Because again, one of the things that helps favor coal generation is if lignin doesn't break down, which it wouldn't, because as we said earlier, the fungi that eat it hadn't evolved. So it's almost like all of this actually makes sense if you stop to think about it and have just a little bit of background information.
Coal commercially, so people go after it just to heat their homes. They go dig out some coal and heat their homes for the winter with it. Just a small, thin layer of coal. But
the bottom of the tree is coalified. So I can't confirm or deny this, but again, that doesn't seem particularly like outlandish, right? That there might be the process of coalification happening a bit faster than the process of permineralization in some parts of the tree versus others. Especially the parts of the trees that were probably exposed to the air for longer, and so couldn't start coalifying until after they were already covered in primarily inorganic sediment, as opposed to the primarily organic material that made the coal. So, like, I don't know what the point is here, because none of this is particularly, like, amazing. Like, this is all sort of like, yeah, and?
The tree is coalified. The center is petrified, and the top is coalified again. It runs through two different coal.
Well, yeah, if you encounter two different floods, both of which at different times wash in organic material and then cover up some of that with some, inorganic sediment, that is a thing that can happen. Yeah.
I thought there was just one flood.
No, actually, as it turns out, there have been many, many, many floods.
What?
Yeah, weird, right?
Crazy.
School are going to tell the kids, a forest has to grow, which is going to take hundreds of years.
Roughly, sure.
And then it gets compacted and slowly turns to coal, which has never been seen by the never seen coal in the process of forming. Like,
no one's ever seen a star form.
So actually, we do see. Well, first we're going to take a drink for no one has ever seen coal in the process of forming, because we see that all the time. Bent, have you ever heard of a peat bog?
Just explain for the audience as if I haven't. Because no, I haven't.
Okay. Well,
I have not.
peat bog is a bog, and a bog is a slow-moving or still swamp with largely anoxic conditions very
Why do you
close.
explain that for the audience too?
Yeah. So anoxic just means lacking oxygen. So the conditions in a bog tend to be anoxic, very, very like high in the water column. And as a result, the material there tends to decay extremely slowly. That's why you get things like bog bodies, if you're familiar with that phenomenon. There are some very famous bog bodies from, I believe, Ireland and Scotland. But also there are some bog bodies from North America, especially in Florida, the Panhandle region. So a peat bog is one of these bogs that has a substance called peat. Peat is a mostly organic sludge that can be dried out, and the remains of it are primarily things like hydrocarbons, and so it burns pretty well once it's dried out. Peat is proto-coal. The deeper down into a peat bog you dig, the more like coal the peat becomes. Because a peat bog is where coal comes from.
You've never seen a tree turn into a coal.
I mean, an entire tree turn into coal in my lifetime, yeah, I've never sat and watched that. But then again, no human has ever sat and watched a giant sequoia grow from a seed to a giant tree.
Everything that ever happens has to happen within the time frame of a human to observe it, or it's impossible, according to Uncle.
Of course, and we have a super chat from James Leeson who says, AIG are a prodigious pouch of pestilent peckers, for which we will take a drink. Thank you very much, James Leeson.
Nice alliteration.
I'm going to have to pour another drink pretty soon. So, yeah, that's where coal comes from, and we watch it happen right now in peat bogs.
like that in nature. And then they'll say, 30, 40 feet of mud had to walk, take another few 100,000 years, and then a whole
No, it would probably take a couple years, maybe a decade.
new forest has to grow to get the of coal. In Yellowstone.
So no, it's not a whole new forest, but it is new plants will take place, and the way that we know this happened is because we have soil horizons. Soil horizons means a soil was established and plants grew in it. And how do we know? Well, because it's right there. We have like the plant roots and the soil and the horizon where the plant roots stop and the next deposition happens, which means the next deposition came in with a new event covering up the previous soil horizon, and then the next year, the new soil started being established. But trees can survive several of these events, and so that's why you have trees at different levels, all of which often tend to have in situ roots, which means they grew there. So, yeah.
National Park, there are 27 consecutive layers of petrified trees.
With soil horizons, meaning it wasn't a single flood that put them there. They had to grow at least over the course of minimum 27 years, but it actually is much longer because it takes more.
And the evolutionists will argue each of the trees in those Yellowstone and Specimen Ridge, I've been there, is about 500 years old. Big
petrified tree trunks in 27 consecutive layers. 500 times 27 is way more time.
Times 27. That's way more time.
You realize
than your Bible
that when
for.
you're reading that, you're counteracting Satan's work.
Sorry, Satan. I'll go eat a baby later.
Well, you're assuming each layer had to form separately.
Well, no, I'm not assuming that. I'm noting that because soil horizons exist and soil takes a while, that they had to happen separately. Like that's a pretty firm conclusion. Yeah, it's a pretty firm conclusion right there.
Based on things that Kent doesn't understand.
Yeah, so we're gonna just we're just gonna take a drink for Kent not knowing the difference between conclusions and assumptions.
My tea for that.
Nice.
What if there was a log mat drifting back and forth over that area as the tide went back and forth and dropped off 27 layers in 2 days?
Then there wouldn't be soil horizons.
Yeah, what if that happened?
All the layers may have formed during Noah's flood.
You know, it doesn't
All
take millions of
27
years.
Noah's floods.
When Mount St. Helens erupted, it blew its logs into Spirit Lake.
Logs on into Spirit Lake.
Hey, you know what? We're going to take a drink for Kent getting something right. That is true. That did happen. Although, it's not all of them were blown to Spirit Lake. A lot of them were just caught up in pyroclastic flows, which I would say is like pushed into the lake. But you know what? It's a minor enough distinction. I'm not going to really make a big deal out of it.
It nearly covered the lake. There were 3 square miles, nearly 2,000 acres of lake covered with wood. You could walk across the water on top of the wood. 2,000 acres of floating logs.
I mean, it is actually true that you, at least it looked like, I wouldn't actually suggest doing it, but essentially the lake was just covered in a solid layer of logs. You can find pictures of it online if you look up like Spirit Lake's Mount St. Helens eruption. If you put in the year, which was like, what is it, like 1983, I think? I don't remember. I think it was early 80s. But yeah, if you put in the year, I'm sure that'll help.
They began to get waterlogged, of course, soaked full of water, and then they began to flip up and float upright. Nearly always it was the root end down because the root end is heavier on the tree. And it was interesting, they began to sink to the bottom by species.
Oh.
The Douglas fir would all sink at the same time, within the same year.
So I can't confirm this, but it does make sense because you would expect different species of trees to tend to cluster around different densities and different amounts of porosity. So both of those things would tend to mean that members of a particular species are at least roughly the right size or a similar size would tend to sink around the same time. And from my understanding, it is the case that these trees tended to stand upright before sinking. And that, yes, they did indeed tend to sink down.
Because they're similar density. Then the spruce would sink a different time. And so they're buried at the bottom of Spirit Lake. Over 20,000 trees are down there right now, stuck in the mud at the bottom of the lake. None of them grew there. None of them.
Hey, we'll take a drink for Ken getting that right, too. It is true. None of the trees grew at the bottom of Spirit Lake.
Okay. They all got blown in by the volcano, floated in upright position, stuck to the bottom. And they're being buried in layer after layer after layer of sediments. Already 15 feet deep in sediments, and it's only been 20 years.
Sure, maybe.
Since the volcano erupted. That's just normal. Every time it rains, it washes dirt in off the side of the mountain, and you know it's just normal to get new sediments to the bottom of the lake every year.
Now?
He will eventually.
He isn't, but does he think he's making a point?
Eventually, he's going to bring it around to this is the same as the upright fossils that we see. Therefore, they could have formed quickly. That's the point he's going to be making. Now, I'm going to say that the amount of sedimentation in the lake is actually not usual. The reason that there's such quick sedimentation in there is specifically because the forest was gone. Forests and plant roots help prevent soil erosion. When a forest is destroyed, soil erosion accelerates. A lake, by virtue of the fact that water can settle there, is in a local depression, which means it's where erosion will go into. So when you have accelerated soil erosion, you will have accelerated deposition in the lake. I don't feel like that's like a super complicated idea, but I guess Kent has to mess it up anyway because he said this is normal. We're actually going to take a drink for him saying, oh, this is normal soil deposition, when it obviously isn't. It's accelerated because of the deforestation. But whatever. Here we go.
Those trees are going to petrify standing up.
If they petrify, yes, we'll take a drink. And actually, I think there's a fair chance that they might fossilize to some degree, because I imagine that Spirit Lake is probably pretty polluted and doesn't have a whole lot of life. So them petrifying does seem like a distinct possibility.
During Noah's flood, you would get this on a worldwide scale. We cover more on that on video 6, but it does not take long.
It does not take long for things to petrify. I mean, it varies, but that's not entirely untrue. And if Kent doesn't actually make the point, I'm going to become rather upset. Take a drink for the fact that he doesn't make the point, and then make it for him, and then point out why it's stupid.
I didn't think
This is a piece of firewood that has quite obviously been chopped on.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so apparently he's not going to. So the point he's trying to make is that Spirit Lake, therefore, is an analog for the Carboniferous upright fossils. Ben, what's this thing I've been harping on this whole time about soil?
Provenance. Oh, wait.
Well, I do harp on that a lot.
Nitrogen, not phosphorus.
Well, that was Dwight's thing. But remember I talked about paleosols?
Yeah, it takes time to form.
Yeah, but you know what the bottom of Spirit Lake doesn't have? Soil horizons.
Soil horizons.
Yep. It's just not going to have those. So when in, 20 million years, when because I, will survive that long presumably, go and look at the fossils of Spirit Lake, I won't find soil horizons, which means that I can tell that I'm probably not looking at trees that grew in situ. So will I be able to distinguish this event from the Carboniferous forests that are petrified forests? Yes. Very easily. The thing is, guys, like, Kent Hovind does the just eyeball it technique. If it kind of feels like it looks similar or it should look similar, you just say it's the same thing. You can't do that. That's not how it works. That will lead you to incorrect conclusions. So let's hear about chopped petrified wood in Arizona's petrified forest. I'm actually not confident that's what that is, because World Explorer, in case you guys don't know, not actually anything like a peer-reviewed archaeological journal. It's basically just a bunch of guys who submit tall tales about their escapades around the world.
Did they take that picture of that with a potato?
Potentially.
Or like one of those 1970s cameras made of like aluminum foil and like these weird flash bulbs that every time you use it, you have to throw it away and buy a new one.
You don't need a flash bulb. You just light it off of the whole entire pack of cigarettes that you're smoking at once because it's the 70s. Yeah. I don't know what this was taken of, and I honestly can't speak to whether or not this is actually petrified wood.
And it's petrified.
Maybe.
We've got in the room right next door here a piece of a petrified pallet.
Okay, so let's just assume, sorry, that Kent is right. This is petrified wood, and it was presumably, I guess, once again, I'm meeting Kent more than halfway with this point here. Let's presume best case scenario for Kent. This is a modern tree chopped with a modern axe that has since petrified. Therefore, petrification can happen quickly. Okay, that doesn't make soil horizons happen quickly. It doesn't make limestone deposit quickly. It doesn't make non-flocculated shale deposit quickly. It doesn't make floods stop erasing bioturbation and ichthyofossils, which, we have both of those in the geological column. It doesn't help any. The point has never been that it takes a long time to petrify. It's that the total sum of the geological column cannot be accounted for in a single event that happened in just a year or slightly more, only a few thousand years ago. Pointing out that petrification could happen quickly does nothing to solve that problem.
I was preaching in western Tennessee, Union City, I believe is the name of this town. And the guy came to the meeting and he said, Mr. Hovind, how long does it take for...
How long does it take for things to petrify?
I said, well, I know wood can be petrified in the laboratory in 24 hours.
I have no idea if it can or not, but I want a citation for that one. Also, even if it can, here's the thing, right? Humans can make ideal conditions for processes, which in nature never really get those ideal conditions. So humans can make things happen faster than nature can make them happen. That's why humans make artificial environments, right? Like, you know what a greenhouse is, right? It's a place where you artificially make the conditions for growth ideal so your plants grow bigger and faster. You couldn't do that outside because you need to be able to do things like control the atmosphere and light levels and the soil nutrients to an exacting level that just couldn't occur if the place were just open to nature. That's just a simple example that, you might have reasonable life experience with. The same thing is with like artificial gem creation, right? Humans make artificial gems with absurdly pure matrices and like starter material, and they use insane amounts of pressure and temperature that actually don't not naturally occur normally, and they can measurably grow crystals faster in an industrial setting than nature does. So the fact that something can happen fast in a lab on its own does not mean that it ever happens that quickly in nature. That just means under ideal conditions. If you want to make the argument that it can happen that fast in nature, you then have to go find those ideal conditions in nature, or at least make a very good argument that they should be findable. But even then, if you then want to say that that process always goes that fast, you then have to find an argument as to why those ideal conditions always occur, or nearly always occur. That's a pretty tall order.
Put it in high mineral content, heat it up, and pressurize it. It'll drive the minerals into the wood fibers and turn to stone in 24 hours.
I see. And was the flood a pressure cooker? Because I feel like it wasn't. I've never heard that the flood was super pressurized. So we're just going to take a drink for some process that, according to Kent, can be accelerated in a way that doesn't match the thing that he's trying to say is the cause for the process. I mean, why wouldn't he, right?
Right.
He said, well, I work at a pallet shop where we make pallets for the forklift to pick up, and carry around. He said, we had a mudslide about 30 years ago. Part of the hill slid down, covered up a bunch of the old pallets, new pallets, actually. And the boss said, forget it. It's not worth digging them out. We can make a new one for $4 or we can dig it out for $6. Make a new one, okay?
I mean, yeah, that makes sense to me. Sometimes you just got to take your losses.
So they just left him. Then he said about 25 years later, or 30 years, I forget what the number was, but somewhere around 20 to 30 years later, he said they were digging a trench across there to put in a septic field, and they hit some of the old pallets that had been buried 20 or 30 years earlier, and they had turned to stone. We got to...
My guess is that in 20 to 30 years, what's actually probably happening is that you're getting minerals infilling the gaps in the pallets, which is going to make them much harder, and it is a step on the way to becoming completely permineralized. So, like, the wood probably hasn't had time to completely rot away if it's been quickly buried in a flood like that. But then again, even if it has completely turned stone, that's actually not that crazy. Petrification actually can happen fairly quickly. No one disputes this. This is just Kent arguing against a straw man, basically.
Piece of one in the next room in there. Petrified pallet. There's petrified wood in there that's been chopped on. One lady asked me, how long does it take for wood to petrify? I said, oh, it can happen pretty quickly. She had a log pile out in her backyard, and we kept using the logs off the top, and every year we'd cut new lumber and cut new logs and stick it on there, and every year we'd heat our house with wood. And we didn't realize it, but the bottom two layers had sunk in, and we kept using off the top of the pile. The
bottom layer's buried, we don't know how long.
I don't know how long, probably 20 years. He said those logs in the bottom, petrified, turned to stone. There were farmers...
Sorry guys, I do think I dropped to 0 KB there for a second, so there might be a quick interruption. But overall, I do think the stream is going smoother than, say, last Kent with Bent. So,
Yep.
Yeah, I'm also not surprised if this is an actual event that happened and they found at least partially permineralized logs, depending on the chemistry of the soil there. Thing is, the argument from taphonomists, which, by the way, is taphonomy is the science that studies how things fossilize, isn't that permineralization has to always take a long time. No one is making that claim. Permineralization can be quick. It's just, okay, and when someone says, hey, this fossil is 120 million years old, what they're not telling you is it took 120 million years to turn this into a fossil. It was a fossil 10,000 years after it died, because that's the definition for what a fossil is. It's the remains of an organism from more than 10,000 years ago. That's arbitrary? Yes, it is. It's completely arbitrary.
Like Keith Richards?
Yes. Well,
Hey-o.
actually, immediately when he dies, he'll become a fossil instantly.
Oh.
It has to be the remains.
Wait, does he have to be dead for 10,000 years, though?
No, I'll say it's if he's lived 10,000 years old already, it's good enough for me, at least.
Okay.
I think I see a doggy. There's a blanket moving. I think there's a doggy under it.
Yep. leaving,
Aw.
walking away.
All right, here we go.
There's in Iowa that were told their grandsons to go out and pull up the old fence posts because they wanted to put in new fence posts, and the bottom from the ground down had
Petrified.
rotted in just less than 1-2 generations. There's a book in the library called Handy Farm Devices.
I'm just going to start taking a drink for every time I would otherwise just be like, yeah, we're going to start now.
It's going to be a lot of drinks.
Yeah, but most of these are just like, yeah, petrification can happen fast. No one's really disputing this. It doesn't matter. I don't think it can always happen as fast as Ken thinks it can, but like, and here's a drink.
It's printed in 1909. They had a section in there on how to petrify wood. 1909. They said you mix alum and I can't forget a couple other things. You mix a solution together, put it in a bucket, set your posts in there as deep as you're going to bury them, and let them sit for a few days, and these minerals will soak into the wood and turn it to stone. And then you go put your posts in. You can still nail your fence to the top because it's wood, but it won't rot on the bottom because it's petrified. Farmers have known for a long time how to do that kind of thing. Here's a petrified fish giving birth. It is
okay. So, my goodness, let's take a. I'm going to polish off this drink. I'm going to pour this pineapple White Claw into my cup, and then we're going to talk about this fossil. Here is the last of the blackberry. Here comes ananas, which, by the way, is ananas. It's basically the word for pineapple in almost every language except for English.
Well, I speak English.
No.
And a tiny amount of Klingon.
I typed some French to a French Twitch streamer today.
I definitely believe you.
I was watching
something you would do.
Yeah, I was watching someone fight Frida in Dark Souls 3, and I told the streamer not to die in French. Because she's French. That's why I did it.
I assume so, yeah.
Right. It wasn't just randomly I just picked French. This was a French person streaming. Anyway, okay, this fish giving birth. Let's talk about this. First, it's only a fish in the same way that you are, right? This is a reptile. Also, for $2, Nathaniel Gray says, 1, that is not a fish. 2, it is not petrified. So, we're going to talk about both of those things. So, thank you very much for that super chat. So first, yes, it's only a fish in the same sense that, like, all tetrapods are fish. This is, in fact, a reptile, and it's more closely related to lizards and snakes than it is to dinosaurs or crocodiles. It is a Lepidosauur. Sorry about that. So that explains a few things, like why it has a separate shoulder girdle from its head and why it has a neck. Why instead of having a caudal fin that has the spine going through the middle of the fin, the spine actually takes a sharp downturn. It also explains why it has hind limbs with a sacral element that is much more tetrapod-like. Also, this is terrible picture quality. Additionally, I don't know where creationists get this version of the picture, but it's been like color swapped to be like poop colored when the original one is sort of a blue slate color. I don't know why they did that, why they decided that like feces was the right color for this image, but they did. Second,
I think I have a couple of reasons why they would do that.
Well, okay. Second, is it giving birth? Well, that is definitely a new book. Well, a neonatal or perinatal member of the same species, which is an Ichthyosaur species from Germany. That's from I think it's from the Posidonia Shale, and I don't remember the actual genus. Sorry about that, but I believe it is from the Posidonia Shale. And that is a member of the same species, and it is emerging from this other Ichthyosaur's reproductive tract, but it's not clear that it's actually giving birth. This could be, in fact, what's called coffin birth, so after a pregnant animal dies, and decay gases start to build up in the various organ cavities, right? One of which is the uterus. But if there's a fetus blocking the uterus, then those decay gases can push the fetus out. It's morbid and gross, yes, but it does occur. It occurs in many animal species, including humans. That's why it's called coffin birth, because humans are typically the only ones in coffins. And people have, in fact, put, heavily pregnant women in coffins and then have exhumed them for various reasons, only to find that they have apparently given birth in the coffin. So it's not clear if this is actually an actual birth that's occurring or if it's a coffin birth. Now, as for whether it's petrified, as Nathaniel Gray asked about, so it depends on your definition. As far as I know, the fossils of the Posidonia shale are fully permineralized, which means that if by petrified you just mean made a formerly organic thing that is now made out of stone, yes, it's petrified. If by that you mean something more specific, then we can have that argument. The technical term is permineralized. You should use permineralized, not petrified. Petrified really is applied to wood as an archaism. So, I'm not going to ding Kent too much for calling it petrified, but let's hear what else he has to say about it.
Does not take millions of years to give birth. I mean, this obviously...
Oh, okay. So first we're going to take a turn for that. That's true. It does not take millions of years to give birth.
Why would that be where his head would go?
Oh, because he's an idiot.
That's it.
That's the whole thing.
I don't understand how someone could be that dumb.
So here we're also
Why would he think that's what would have to have happened?
I don't know. We're taking another drink for that being a stupid thing to say, and then we're going to talk about it. So, if you die in childbirth in the process, and then say you start sinking, you're not likely to finish that process anytime soon, unless, of course, there's the coffin birth thing. So, it doesn't have to take millions of years to give birth. All you have to do is die around the time of childbirth, which I don't know if people know, but before medicine, childbirth was one of the most common causes of death of basically post-pubescent post-pubescent human females, period. Right? That was a leading cause of death for human females if they made it to puberty. Death in childbirth. Now, Bent, I don't know for sure what kind of medical infrastructure German ichthyosaurs had, but I'm going to guess it was none. Do you object to my guess here?
I feel like that's a very fair assumption that you made.
Okay.
Or is that a conclusion that you're making?
It's mostly an assumption. It's a little bit of both. Oh, there's Mothra. We'll drink for Mothra. Thank you, Mothra. Okay. So, that means that even though we don't actually know if this was a coffin birth and unassociated with the actual birth process or not, even if it were associated with birth, this would be completely unsurprising. And it wouldn't have to take millions of years. Things die in childbirth. That's a thing that happens. So...
And they don't have to, like if the event kills the animal at the time of childbirth and buries it right away, it doesn't have to happen instantly. That could still take a very long time. It's not like this dead thing's going to float away or anything.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to take thousands of years to give birth. That is just a ridiculous assumption.
Yep.
That makes so little sense that I had to pretend to swallow all of these pills. Don't swallow a whole bunch of pills.
Yeah. It's at least as stupid as I don't know, but you've been working on classical music. When was it written? Remember?
Hundreds of years ago. I don't remember.
Let's just say 300, because it was written in 1700s, right?
I think so. 17 or 1800s.
Let's just say 17, right?
I can Google it.
I mean, it's not terribly important. But it's like if you were to start playing it right now and then finish, and then I said, gee, I didn't know it would take you 300 years to play that song. Well, no, it didn't. The song was already written. It's just, you just went and looked at it. It doesn't... The whole... Yeah, none of this. So here we go. And Silver Harlow says the childbirth could literally be what killed the mother and child. Yeah, that things die in childbirth. And if the mother dies in childbirth and can't complete the process, baby's probably going to die too. All right, here we go.
It's a very rapid event. Okay, here's a petrified cowboy boot with the cowboy's leg still in it.
Okay, what about that indicates that it's petrified. I see leather-colored leather, with the actual patterning still visible on the leather if you look, especially at the left-hand side. I see what looks like just a normal set of leg bones with sediment infilling the boot on the right. I don't believe that this is petrified. This looks like a boot that some unfortunate cowboy either lost part of his leg or the rest of him rotted away. And now we're left with a still leather boot and the flesh rotted away and sediment filled the interior of the boot. Nathaniel Gray says, does Cindy ever come watch these? She stops in every once in a while. She has trouble listening to Kent Hovind for this long, and I do not blame her one bit. So, Cindy does stop in to say hi on occasion. But I think for very understandable reason, it's not terribly free, and she doesn't stay long. So, like, yeah, I don't... Why any of this is being said to be petrified, I have no idea. It's still leather-colored, man. Like, did it just happen to be some leather-colored rock that it turned into? That seems really convenient. Alright, well, I'm just taking a drink for this obviously non-petrified petrified.
I mean, it does say petrified cowboy leg and not boot.
Okay, but even the leg...
Cowboy's bone turned into bone.
Bone just looks like a normal bone with sediment around it. Alright, Vandalia 1998 for $5 says, happy birthday at Benthoven, no relation. I hope you got a refund for your gift since you got a Kent Hovind for your birthday with a Mothra emoji. Drink for the Mothra emoji. Thank you very much, Vandalia 1998.
Thank you so much for that. Everybody who's made birthday wish counts. Thank you all so much. I can't respond to all of them, but I see them and I really do appreciate it. So, thank you all.
Also, DM Wing said we had to explain AIG is a bag of dicks to her. Yeah. That was a little bit like having my mom in here and having her ask that question. I was like, oh, okay, well, you see. All right, here we go. And we're going to take a break pretty soon.
Right next door, in the next room right out there, you can see the petrified pickle. Have you seen that one, Robert? Petrified pickle? I think, Nathan...
I haven't seen the petrified pickle. Based on this, I don't know if it exists.
I think I unscrewed the screw at the top and just put it in barely. Can you bring that in, the pickle in the jar? You know which one it is, don't you?
Yes.
Go in the room and just, the screw's just barely in the top, so you should be able to get that open. A guy called me from Montana, 3 years ago, I guess, and said, Brother Hovind, I found this old house in Montana. Most of it had fallen down. It was an old homestead. You know, the roof was gone, the walls are laying out. But he said there's part of a pantry was there, and there was a pickle jar. The lid to the jar had rusted off, and the pickle inside turned to stone.
How? Okay, I want us to picture the scenario, right? So apparently, we just have a jar sitting in the air, right? And the lid rusts off. So we'll assume generously that means that all of that iron oxide fell into the jar, onto the pickle.
It evaporated away.
Well, no, we'll say it stayed on.
You're right. It fell down.
So now the pickle has turned to stone from what? Right? Where is the stone coming from? Because permineralization isn't a process where organic material just spontaneously chemically turns into something that doesn't even have the same atomic makeup, right? Like the atoms in a pickle aren't just going to disappear and turn into other atoms. Like no nuclear processes are likely to take place that will be converting the carbon and oxygen and hydrogen into things like iron and silica, right? Like, how did this happen, Kent? Physically, explain the process.
The lid was made out of stone.
But he said it rusted, so it was made of iron.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we can change what can rust, like stone can rust now. Let's just pretend that can happen now.
Okay, maybe.
Then it'll make sense.
Sure. Let's see what happens here.
Would you like it for your museum? I said, of course. Who in their right mind would not want a petrified pickle for their museum, you know? So
I mean, anyone who cares about things like provenance or checking or, you know, making sure things make sense, those kind of people wouldn't want a petrified pickle for their museum, probably.
He gave it to me. Is he having trouble getting it out of there? Okay. Yeah, bring it on in here, brother.
Yep.
So you can see it now. It was the jar was intact.
Oh, we get to see it. The jar was intact, but not the lid. Okay. I was about to make a complaint, but he did say the jar and not the lid, so.
And I got it. And I set it down, and apparently the pickle being stone in there bumped the bottom and shattered the bottom. So I glued all the pieces back together.
You glued the pieces of the bottom of the jar back together?
Why not just use a different jar?
Yeah, it's a mason jar, presumably. Just get another one. Okay, whatever. I don't care.
Of the bottom of the glass, but it was intact.
Oh, there's Mothra.
Holy.
So we take a drink from Mothra, and with that, we're actually going to go on a quick intermission. Guys, we will be right back as soon as we can. Stick with us, because I hope we get to see the alleged petrified pickle on screen. That's my hope.
I've never been this excited to return from a break. Never been, ever.
All right, here we go. All right, and we are back. Guys, right before we dive back into this, it is time for my impassioned plea that I make at the end of or after every break. I don't know how it works. So, if you guys want to support the channel, please either join or head over to the Patreon and select a tier there. Oh, there's Godzilla. On the Patreon and the channel membership, there are multiple tiers starting as low as $1 on the Patreon or $1.99 on the channel membership page. It gets you access to about 2 months worth of early access videos. There's a exclusive Discord server at higher tiers. You can get your names in the credits. You can get Blender files for 3D projects I create. You get input on next videos. There's all sorts of perks that come with it. There's a 12% discount on the Patreon if you join annually. And quite frankly, this month is going to be pretty rough. So I would really appreciate it if you can seriously consider that. Because something came up that I wasn't expecting, and it cost money, and I didn't like it. And it just, that's all I'm really going to say. It just means that, yeah, I would appreciate it if you did, in fact, at least seriously consider it. Now, okay, I want to say, if you can't afford it, please do not do this, right? If you need that money, keep it. I do not want to take money from someone who can't afford it. So this is only if you can afford it and you want to. I just ask that if the first is true, you can afford it, you do seriously consider it, because it really would help out a lot. Carrie Bronson for $10 says, here's your regular reminder that the Ark Encounter is currently suing for a flood damage, making it go soft too soon. Here's to another year older and wiser. May you grow old but never grow up, Bent.
I am a Toys R Us kid.
Now I want to be fair for the flood damage. The Ark Encounter is suing for flood damage, but it is to a walkway and not to the structure of the Ark.
But it is funny, though.
It is funny. I'm not going to deny it. However, I do want to make sure that we have the accurate info out there. Oh, Science Side Up sent this super chat that I missed. Sorry about that. Let me find... Oh, here we go. Science Side Up, while we were on break, for $2, said, AIG is a peck of petrified pickles. We're going to drink for that one. That was pretty awesome. Guys, if you're not subscribed to Science Side Up, first I'm going to say Science Side Up, put your channel in the chat here. Go subscribe to Science Side Up. She has great content. Also, I don't want her to kill my character in D&D because she's our GM for Guns, Magic, and Steel on Chesh's channel. So I always tell people to go subscribe to her because she's already killed my character like 4 times, or almost killed my character 4 times, and I want him to live for a while. Also, of course, she plays Claire, our Blue Ranger, on Power Rangers Jungle Beast, which is a Power Rangers tabletop RPG actual play on Top Hats Off, which will be happening, I guess, tomorrow. Tomorrow? Yeah, I think it's tomorrow. Yeah, no, it's definitely tomorrow. I should probably set that show up.
Yeah.
So,
for sure, go subscribe to Science Side Up right now. Open it in a new tab so you don't have to leave this one, and then click subscribe, and then click the bell, and then after Kent with Ben's over, watch all the videos.
Mm-hmm.
Not at the same time; they'll overlap, and that will get confusing. In order, though.
Here we go. Here's more Kent.
The guy who found it contacted the
manufacturer of the jar,
because almost all bell jars like this. I think you're right.
Almost
all these jars have a number on the bottom, and you can chase down what company made it based on the number.
Okay, that's actually a good reason to glue the thing back together if you're going to try and do some detective work. So, okay, fair enough. That's a pretty good reason to glue it back together. Okay.
So he chased it down, and they said, oh, that's the style of jar we made from 1930 to 1960. So the pickle...
What?
Pickle.
Other than being in a mason jar, what about that screams pickle? I guess, and also being, like, approximately the shape, but...
Sure.
Okay, sure. Nothing about that screams pickle to me, but then again, it is 480p, so, you know.
Which is turned to stone.
Yeah, it is.
It looks like 480, like, I don't know, some letter that means you can't see anything.
Well, the 480 might also itself be upscaled, so who knows?
Had to be put in the jar, you know, after somewhere 1930 to 1960. Who knows when the house rotted and fell apart.
Trying to get a good...
You know, at least the cameraman's trying
1960,
right?
So the pickle
Look at all these
which is turned to
fancy
stone.
things. See how
Had to
great
be
they
put
are?
in the jar, you know,
We're going to
after
super slow motion.
somewhere 1930 to 1960. Who knows when the house...
Wait, like, that's quite perfectly cylindrical, I think, other than the chip there.
Yeah, does that look like a cucumber interior? It's like
No.
it doesn't really to me either.
I think someone just put a rock in a pickle jar because people do things. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not very convinced that this was ever a pickle. Well, Bitcourse says it looks more like a turd. Yeah, it does look more like a turd. Okay, sure, Kent.
Rotted and fell apart, but the pickle inside turned to stone. And like I said, the bottom of the jar is busted up only because I did it, okay, accidentally.
It doesn't even
this
look
one.
Like, I can't even see the bottom of the jar to tell that it's been broken.
I mean, look, it's
not really showing.
It's there.
I know
it's there in the room. I don't think he's gonna lie about that.
You gonna pass it around? Pass it to the class or whatever? I mean,
presumably.
Look, I guess he's doing this on camera, but he's also doing it for a group of people. So, I think in the room. I think. So I don't. Who knows? I just don't know why he wouldn't have close-ups of it.
Mackenzie Brown asks, "Wouldn't a petrified pickle be wrinkly?" Well, it would depend on how fast it petrified, right? Because Kent isn't wrong when he says things can petrify quickly. They can, and under ideal circumstances. I just don't see any reason to think that this pickle magically transmuted itself into stone, like it's being like soul cast from like the Stormlight archives. I don't.
One cast a spell on it.
Yeah, basically that's the only explanation. Is it was magic. Apparently, this stone just entered it from nowhere, and it was turned to stone from nothing. Which I said to Bent on the break, like it's exactly as silly as saying it turned to gold, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make a difference. The fact that the material it turned into is more mundane than solid gold doesn't make the claim less ridiculous.
Well, it doesn't look like gold when he shows it, but it's also not a pickle.
Right. But even if he had a gold cylinder there,
it would be just as absurd.
Right. It wouldn't help the case. It's just like it's the same level of crazy talk. Here we go.
I think some of the guys may be saying that's a petrified pickle, but actually that's a fern impression that's sitting next to it in there. We have
right. Okay, whatever. I just don't understand why you would put those two things in the same place. Whatever. Who cares though?
Right in there, petrified
charcoal. Like it's briquette. A jar that someone stored things in their house.
Maybe they stored a cylindrical rock that had a chip in it.
That's a petrified octopus arm, a replica of one.
Mortar and pestle.
Oh, he's got a replica of a petrified octopus arm. Well, that's handy. How do we know that there's an original? Who knows? I'm taking a drink for the...
Something that looks just like this thing, but isn't this thing.
I'm taking a drink for... We have a replica petrified octopus arm. Okay, great. You know what the difference between a replica petrified octopus arm and a statue of an octopus arm is?
No.
Yeah, there's none. There's basically no difference. Unless, of course, there's an original petrified octopus arm, which I don't think there is.
Citation needed.
Yeah, we'll put the citation needed video up. By the way, guys, if you need a citation needed GIF, use that one. It's on the tenor GIF keyboard, and I would really love it if that thing made it to like #1 citation needed GIF on all platforms. I think it's currently like #2 on Discord and #4 on Twitter.
It's better than those other ones.
Yeah, so use that one if you can, and encourage others to use it. It won't get me anything. I will make no money. I will gain no fame. I just
but you did make it.
Yeah, I want the emotional satisfaction of being the originator of the top used citation needed.
Yeah, not some second most used. Who cares about that?
Exactly. All right, here we go.
Things don't take long to petrified. How many got to see the petrified teddy bear? Did you see the petrified teddy bear in there?
I've seen the petrified teddy bear. It's not petrified, it's calcified. We're going to take a drink, talk about that real quick.
I thought that was the answer for the trees early on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are calcified trees, but the petrified forest trees are not. They have a much more complicated history. So,
Believe you. I just remember Kent making this point a year or two ago on a Kent with Ben, and that was the answer that I remember you giving.
And you ever live in a place with really hard water, like I don't know, southern Arizona?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You ever notice a white, hard crust that builds up on things like faucets and hoses and things?
Mm-hmm. And like in the water dish for the dog.
Yeah, or sometimes even on like the interior of a coffee pot on your coffee maker.
Yes.
That's calcium primarily. Yeah, hard water builds up calcium on the exterior of surfaces that have that hard water evaporate from it. That's the whole thing. The petrified teddy bear is from a particular waterfall in I believe in England, although it might actually be in Scotland and just be in the UK broadly, where the water is extremely hard, so people hang things under the waterfall so the water flows over them, and they become encrusted in calcium. That's it. That's the whole explanation. That's the whole thing. Now, are permineralized fossils generally made out of a crust of calcium formed over a bone or a tree? No, they're not. Yeah, you're right. So this is completely irrelevant.
Get that one right.
Yeah. So this whole thing is silly.
There's a place in Czechoslovakia. Have you seen that? Place in Czechoslovakia where, actually Czech Republic, it used to be Czechoslovakia, they split it up 2 countries now. But
okay, cool.
In the Czech Republic, there's a waterfall that's real high in minerals.
Oh, I guess there's one. I mean, maybe there's one in the Czech Republic too. I don't know. I do know that there is one in the UK though.
So they hang all kinds of stuff in there.
Yeah, I think you might just be mixing the two up. Although I'm not going to say that it's impossible that people would do the same thing in the Czech Republic. I mean, sounds like a fun activity, so I guess people all over the world could do it if they had the right waterfall.
You hang anything there, and within 2 or 3 weeks, it's coated with minerals. And it's not really petrified, it's permineralized.
No, it's not even permineralized, Kent. It's calcified. Oh my goodness, I'm taking a drink.
Like he can't even hear us.
Yes, it is like that.
I know.
It's solid rock. I mean, it's rock coating on the outside. If you left it there long enough or soaked it in this stuff, it would turn to solid rock.
No, it wouldn't. It might be suffused with rock, but the original would still be there. Which, okay, in some fossils the original material is still there, but not in all of them. And when you say permineralized, it usually implies that the original is gone.
But the petrified teddy bear's in there, the petrified rose, they hang all kinds of stuff in there and then sell it, souvenirs on a petrified teddy bear. Not very cuddly. But so the point is, it doesn't take long for things to petrify, and the petrified trees in the standing position.
I like that he acknowledged that it's actually not the same process, but he's using it as an example anyway, and he doesn't think that that's in any way a problem. He's like, yeah, I know this is an irrelevant example, but I'm going with it anyway. Just have fun with it. Like, you could have just not. You could just not bring up complete irrelevancies, Kent. That's an option to you.
Yeah, well, he's got to have his filler material for his, in between of his other filler material.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
All of it's filler, I guess.
My goodness. All right, here we go.
I think are really good evidence for a rapid burial in Noah's flood. Only way I can see producing all those thousands of layers.
For that?
It's not. So the thing is
demonstrating that he thinks it could be compatible with, therefore he thinks that's evidence for.
Yeah. Basically, the argument goes, calcification and permineralization can be fast. Therefore, it is always fast. Therefore, it can't ever occur over a long period of time, nor can there be long periods of time between episodes of permineralization or calcification. That's where the problem is.
It must have happened during a global flood.
Yeah, therefore it must have happened. Like, you can see
lots of jumps.
There's a whole lot of things to which I could play this video.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.
Which, of course, is from the original series Star Trek. All right, here we go.
The other thing you got to consider in your worldview of how the flood would fit in here. In a flood, you have
you have an interesting situation.
An interesting situation. because the Earth is still turning and the moon is up there pulling the water up, the tides, okay? What's the tide in California where you're from, brother? How far does it go up and down? 5 foot? Okay. So up and down 2.5 feet? Okay. Low tide to high tide, 5 foot difference. Here in Pensacola, it's only like 18 inches. Up at the Bay of Fundy in Canada, it can get up to, I think it's 60 feet average, and the highest spring tide is 102 feet.
Okay, so let's remember that. In the Bay of Fundy, it can get all the way up to a 102-foot difference. I'm not going to contest that, right, because I don't care what the exact number is. The important thing to remember is the Bay of Fundy is where it's highest, according to Kent, and I believe that's also just true, right? So let's continue on noticing what a bay is, which is to say it's an enclosed area of ocean that is not open to the broader ocean, which makes the water inside the bay relatively calm, which is why it's a popular place for building like docks and ports and piers and other such associated nautical things. The place where the land interfaces with the ocean-going vessels.
The world's record tide, Bay of Fundy. The tide is coming in so fast, you can pay $5 or $10 and get in a rubber raft with a bunch of people and sit in front of it, and it pushes you. It's like 20 miles.
It's like surfing 20 miles. Okay. I have no idea if that's true. Maybe.
Pushes you up the, what's the name of that river? No, I forget the name of the river, but who cares? But anyway, yes, it's pretty cool. He does that a couple times a day, and it erodes away the beach rapidly up there in Bay of Fundy, Nova Scotia, Canada. Well, if the moon...
which was unaffected by the flood, well, unless of course you're going for hydroplate theory, in which case it was a lunar bukkake, which I'm not sure if I'll get demonetized for saying, but if you don't know what that is, kids,
we'll find out.
You'll learn when you're old enough.
Affected by the flood down on the Earth, the moon doesn't care. So the Earth is flooded. Now you got a strange situation, because the tide starts to come up and then it bangs into something like, you know, California or
like a bay where on nearly every side it's bounded by land. Okay, so remember, the place with the highest tides has a place for the tide to quote unquote bump into on almost every side.
You know, South America.
It's in South America, but
we have continents that stop it. And so it just starts to get going and runs into something it can't get over. And so it kind of takes all the energy out of it. Well,
interesting.
If the Earth were covered by water, that wouldn't happen.
Well, there's a place where it doesn't happen right now, which is around Antarctica. So why is it that around Antarctica doesn't currently have the highest tides, and instead it's the Bay of Fundy where the tide is running into something at almost every angle? Now, I don't actually know the answer to that. I just know that it directly contradicts whatever the heck Kent is going for.
Kent doesn't understand tides because nobody understands tides. But he especially doesn't understand tides.
Look, tide comes in, tide goes out. Never a miscommunication. You can't explain that. So, that's the Bill O'Reilly proof of God. Okay, Bill. I'll bet Kent would love that phrase. I think Kent would think that's a killer argument for God.
He might.
Tide would go up and down about 200 feet.
I would love to see numbers on that. I don't even need a citation. I just want numbers. I want Kent's math. Kent, show your work.
If the Earth were covered by water. A 200-foot tidal change. Earth.
You didn't subtitle that, guys? Come on.
If you get all that water rushing, being pulled up.
Oh, Satan broke their keyboard right at that point.
It's got to rush in from the sides to fill in that lump.
Also, I gotta say, if there's a Satan and Christianity is true, he's got to be working for Kent, not against Kent.
He's like, that guy's helping me out. I'm just going to leave him alone.
Yeah.
The water rushing in from the sides is going to be causing stratification at the bottom. It's going to be scouring things and shuffling things around. Plus,
so it's not going to be causing stratification. There is a thing called tidal bedding, right? Okay, so I'm going to take a drink, and then I'm going to explain it, because I had to take a drink. Okay, so
Yummy.
Tides cause cross-bedding, specifically. That means that there's bedding that is angled up and then bedding that's angled down, and that's you pick a direction to measure from, right? So they're at cross angles, and it happens at particular intervals that you can calculate given things like how quickly the grains were deposited, which you can determine by things like grain size. You can determine by things like how well rounded the grains are, what the grains are made of, things like you can do things that would approximate deposition periods, and then you can say, okay, well then that means that these cross beds are probably happening about twice a day, which means they're going to, in most deposits, be very dense. Tidal cross bedding is very noticeable. If Kent wants to use this to explain the deposition of a large section of the geologic column, he's going to have to demonstrate that there's tidal cross bedding that's pervasive through that period. Spoiler alert, it's just not the case. Most rock deposits, even marine, don't have tidal cross bedding. Sorry, Kent. This isn't like with almost everything else he says. You can just check, right? You can literally just go check. Does this rock contain tidal cross bedding? In most cases, the answer is just a flat no. Like, geologists have looked into this, right? They're not just like, oh, who knows, tidal cross bedding, I don't know. No, it's a thing.
You trust the professionals? You trust the experts? The ones who would know? You trust those people?
I not only trust the experts.
You trust the trustworthy people?
Not only do I trust
I'm flabbergasted.
Not only do I trust the experts, I've also looked into why they say the things that they say and determined that, yes, that makes sense.
Are you even thinking?
Yes, as it turns out.
You should just trust my stupid interpretation of the Bible that doesn't talk about any of this at all instead.
Tesla Ranger says Kent doesn't believe in cross-bedding, no mixed sheets. There you go. That's in that like extra chapter of Leviticus that everyone forgets about. All right, here we go.
Just 200 feet of water weighs a lot. It would press down on the sediments underneath, and then when the low tide comes by, it would relieve that pressure. So the sediments at the bottom are being squeezed and relieved, squeezed and relieved. That causes a phenomenon called liquefaction. We'll get into more of that in seminar part.
Over the course of a day, probably not. So liquefaction is a. First, we're going to take a drink for.
We'll look up if the tides cause
liquefaction. Yeah. So liquefaction is a phenomenon where a group of similarly sized solid particles begin to behave like a liquid when there is a fluid between the particles that is separating them at a sufficient degree, right? So things that are less dense than these particles will then float on them, and things that are more dense will sink into them. Quicksand is an example of liquefaction of sand, right? There's enough water between the sand particles. The sand itself starts to act, a bit like a liquid. You can also do liquefaction in sand with air. If you have little air holes blowing air up into into like a container of sand, you can get the sand to act like liquid. It will flow. You can float or sink things in it. If you have, say, some things that are less dense than the sand buried in the sand, and you start up the air, they'll rise up through the column of sand. But a roughly twice a day cycle of high and low pressure is probably not going to be enough of liquefaction in sediment. And even if it did, it would just mean that the sediment being deposited is going to be deposited in one big graded bedding where the most dense particles are at the bottom, least dense particles are at the top. You know what doesn't characterize the geologic column? One big graded bed. The geologic column has like low density, high density, medium density, high density, low density, all over the place in essentially random order. So none of this works. Not only is it unlikely to cause liquefaction in the first place, and I would want to see numbers on that, but even if it did, it wouldn't result in the actual rocks that we see. It would result in very different, very distinctive rocks. So once again, none of this works.
What causes liquefaction? Because I keep Googling it and like...
So it's basically...
Tides doesn't show up when I search for the word tides.
Shocker.
It's weird. So like earthquakes.
It's
and stuff
having
like
a sufficient amount of fluid separating the particles that we're talking about being having liquefaction. So water,
no tides.
yeah, tides aren't going to cause it. Now, water can. Like I said, quicksand is essentially a combination of water and sand where the sand has liquefaction going on. Which, by the way, it's not going to suck you under. If you can float in water, you can float in quicksand. So it can be tough to get out of.
I don't remember how. I've read a joke. I don't remember how it's phrased, but basically, like quicksand is when you're a kid, you're just terrified of it. You're trained to be terrified of quicksand.
Yeah, by all the TV shows.
It's like you expect there's like a 20% chance you're going to die from just being in quicksand.
I think it's roughly like
suffocating.
You know, as an adult, I found that quicksand is a much less significant problem in my daily life than I was led to believe as a child.
There was something else listed alongside quicksand.
All right, here we go.
6. But the lifting and separating of the particles causes the denser ones to go to the bottom and the lighter ones to go to the top.
We're going to take a drink for Kent being right about that. And then we're going to take another drink after for him being dumb. We're going to talk about why that's dumb. Why is it dumb? Well, because that doesn't characterize the rocks, the geologic column. They're not sorted by density in any meaningful way across the whole column. They're just not. So I agree, that is what it would cause, Kent. Too bad that's not what we see.
Boom roasted.
I love it when Kent does my job for me. Thanks, Kent. Amazing.
There was a guy who did an experiment. All the details are talked about on Walt Brown's website, creationscience.com. But he took a cement mixer and mixed up dead birds, dead fish, dead amphibians, dead reptiles.
What? Where is he getting all these dead animals? This is the weirdest. Okay, sure.
I think he's just making up a story again.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I'll wait for a little bit longer, but this continues to sound like a story that just didn't happen. We'll take a drink for it.
Dead mammals and sand, rocks, gravel, mud, mixed them all up, and he dumped them into a large aquarium. But before he put them in the aquarium, he put a big hot water bottle in the bottom, hooked to a hose, where he poked 1,000 holes in this hot water bottle. Okay. So when he turned the hose on, it's going to fill the aquarium from the bottom, coming out all these little holes. So the water's going to be squirting up like 1,000 little squirt guns in the bottom of the aquarium under all this material mixed up in a cement mixer. When he turned the water on and it filled the aquarium from the bottom, as the water is pushing up, it's going to lift sand grains and rocks and particles.
This actually would cause liquefaction most likely. So we've got that going for us.
And then it's going to drop them again. Okay. But the denser ones are going to drop just a little bit faster than the less dense.
This is true. We'll take a drink for it.
Not in a vacuum, they wouldn't.
Well, okay, but this is explicitly underwater,
I know.
By the time the aquarium was full, it had already stratified the whole thing. It was
not stratified. Those would be laminae because they'd all be from one depositional event. But okay.
Dozens of layers.
You keep using that word. I'm not sure it means what you think it means.
Exactly. Oh yeah, Walt Brown is a crankfish auntie. Absolutely. I also am not sure that this experiment ever happened. However, given how crazy Walt Brown is, I wouldn't put it past him.
Material, and the fish were at the bottom, amphibians were next, reptiles were next, mammals were last.
Why wouldn't the birds be last? Because on average, those are definitely the least dense of all those. But I have never seen anything indicating that fish are significantly more dense than amphibians, who are significantly more dense than reptiles. I would actually be surprised if that were the case. Now, with the mammals, I would be less surprised, because mammals tend to be fat, and fats are lighter than water. So that wouldn't surprise me, right? If it went, what I would expect is fish, amphibians, reptiles, all just sort of roughly the same. Then mammals, then birds. And yeah, as DM Wing says, this is a citation needed sort of situation here. So yeah, I don't
this
believe
is not a
these
thing
results.
I've ever considered, and I don't even know what it has to do with anything anyway.
Well, he's saying this is how the geologic column is formed. But here's the problem, right? You know what we find all the way up at the top with all the mammals and birds? Fish, amphibians, reptiles. Why?
It's not how it's formed, though. Like,
right, that's the thing. Is he's saying that this is how it's formed, but
there's
it obviously isn't.
multiple reasons why.
Yeah.
From different facets of why this is not.
I'm glad that you did. Well, I guess Walt Brown did an experiment that disproved the flood model. Thanks, Walt Brown.
Now, the evolutionists will use an acronym FARM, F-A-R-M, mnemonic device, FARM. Fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal.
I wouldn't, but I can see why someone might have.
They will look at the geologic structure of the Earth and say, hey, did you know generally birds are found on top?
They are found on top, but they're also found from the Jurassic on up. So, kinda.
Yep. And clams are generally found at the bottom.
Wrong. We're taking a drink for that one. And I'm actually going to finish off this. What flavor was it? I can't tell just by drinking it. Pineapple. Okay, so I'm going to pour a mango White Claw here. Give me a second. So why am I saying it's wrong that clams are generally found at the bottom? Well, first, mollusks themselves don't come until fairly well into the Cambrian. I mean, they're still pretty early, but bivalves don't occur until even later. Clams even later. And then once they occur, they don't stop occurring. If everything is caused by this density sorting, then why are there clams up at the highest layers with birds? That don't make no sense.
The two.
Yay. All right.
Yep.
It's hard to see.
They'll say, see, don't you understand that proves clams evolve first and birds evolve last?
I mean, proof? No, it's pretty good evidence, though.
No, there might be a couple of other ways to think about that, you know. Maybe clams are at the bottom because that's where they live, okay? They're going.
Well, then why are they also at the top, Kent? That's what you have to explain. Why do we have fossils of clams all the way up the geologic column? All the various, once clams evolve, whenever we have a depositional environment that seems like it should include clams, it generally does, all the way up to the top. Why is that? That's the thing you have to explain. It's great that the fact that clams are relatively dense, which they are, and that they're found near the bottom of the fossil-bearing strata, which they are, that's great. I accept that could be well explained by density sorting. What about them Eocene clams there, Kent? What about them? How'd they get there? Are they light? Are they made of like pumice instead of calcium carbonate? Like, is that what's going on? What's the deal? Kent doesn't have an answer. He's never even considered.
Going to be the first ones buried. They're already at the bottom when the flood starts.
Oh, so it's that they're already at the bottom. It's not they're more dense. You're just changing your story midstream. We're taking a drink for that one.
It's bad. It's a tough one.
Mango does not mix well with this cough drop. I'm just going to say that.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Maybe birds are on top because they're the last ones to drown in a flood.
Okay. What about these flying reptiles called what are they called, Ben? They have the one big finger. A lot of them don't have teeth. Some of them do.
Give me a hint. Give me another hint.
I think it's like there's a P in there for the same reason as pneumonia, but like you don't say it normally.
I don't know.
Pterosaurs, that's it.
Pterosaur.
Yes, Pterosaurs. What about them? They were often, in many cases, lighter for their body size than birds. But you never find them above the Cretaceous. You don't. Yeah, that's a good question. Why not? Why don't they make it to the top? Why do they stop when the big reptile dinosaurs, the non-bird dinosaurs? Why do they stop at the same time?
No one will ever know. Moving on.
Yeah, no consideration to that.
No consideration why it would be worth considering.
Run out of gas.
Right.
So it doesn't prove they are evolved in that order. They might be sorted based upon their density.
Well, we already know that can't work because it doesn't work for pterosaurs. It doesn't even work for birds, really. It doesn't work for clams. It just doesn't work.
Based upon their density and not destiny.
Well, there is
It's
that.
a mistake, like George McFly did that one time.
Intelligence, based upon their mobility. Clam.
Their intelligence?
What?
Okay. I want to know what it is about, say, Quetzalcoatlus that Kent thinks is dumber than, say, a turkey, which is a notoriously stupid bird, even if it is my favorite dinosaur. Like, turkeys are more dense than most birds. They're really bad flyers, right? That's just true for ground fowl. And hey, spoiler alerts, we have ground fowl from the Cretaceous on. We also have Quetzalcoatlus in the Cretaceous. So why is it that the ground fowl make it all the way up to the top of the flood or whatever, and then not the Quetzalcoatlus? Why is that? They're denser and dumber. I don't know.
Can't run very
Must have
fast,
been a
you know.
miracle.
They might be sorted based upon their habitat, where they live, you know.
Oh my goodness,
One already
the
at the bottom's
drink
gonna be the
number
first
just
one
went
buried.
crazy,
Lives there.
and I'm not going to fix it.
And a clam, as far as we can figure out, it's not too bright. When something strange happens in his environment, he doesn't know what's going on. What's he do?
A lot of drinks. I got to
Clam up. Let's wait till the...
Kent first told a joke that didn't really hit or land, which was clam up. We're going to take a drink there. Also, I don't know if anyone... Does anyone know how many drinks that was? We skipped?
Well, we were at 31.
Oh, okay, so we should be at 32.
Now we'll be at 32.
All right, well, in that case, I actually am going to fix it.
I only know because of the delay on the stream. I get to see it change.
So there we go.
Backtrack.
We should be fine now.
Nice.
We also zoomed in because I'm a dummy, which I don't know how.
Did you do that, or did his cameraman do that?
No, I did that, but it wasn't me intentionally. It was some of my sound tiles falling onto the zoom in button, which also happens to be the increase the drink number button.
Of course.
So we're not going to worry about this too much. Yeah, anyway, here we go.
Danger goes past. Well, if he's clammed up and being covered by
Yeah, whatever. It's fine.
thousands of feet of sediment, or even 20 feet of sediment, he's done for. Now he can't open.
What are you talking about, Kent? Clams move through sediment pretty easily if it's unconsolidated. Like, that's one of their big things. That's one of the reasons why clams are all over the beach, right? If you're walking through the beach and you see some bubbles bubbling up from the beach, there's basically one of two things that are going to be under there. A bivalve, which is probably going to be some kind of clam, or maybe a lancelet. If you dig, every time I've dug with one of those bubbles, I've pulled up a clam. And then you know what it does almost immediately when I let it go? It digs back under the sand.
What?
Really quickly. Everyone thinks of clams as just not moving. They can both swim and dig pretty quickly. They're well adapted to their environment. They're actually really good at being clams, surprisingly enough, right?
And they have the shell for protection.
Yeah. So, I don't know what to tell you, Kent.
Interesting. I mean, I didn't know that, but I'm also not sitting there teaching a class spewing nonsense.
Well, I've never taught that to a class, but I did teach it to some of my nieces and nephews. Oh, yeah. Yeah, a few years ago, I visited a vacation place with my parents and my nieces, well, some of my nieces and nephews. And that was one of the things I taught the older ones at the beach was like, yeah, see these bubbles? There's a clam under there. And you can dig it up, but, you know, you got to put it back, right? Don't just haul it out of the water or anything, because that'll kill it. But that's how you find a live clam. Anyway, here we go.
And he's going to die in the closed position, and that's just the way they're found. You said,
why is it just going to dig up? They can dig up. That's the thing they can do.
they found giant ones down in Baja California? South of Tijuana? Okay. Now, we got pictures in there. 11-foot oysters found on top of mountains 2 miles above sea level.
Okay, we're going to take a drink. So I'm going to try and zoom this out, so give me a second here.
Yay.
Okay. But that also means that now I have to bring this back to 32. We're gonna bring it back up to 32. Okay, I think we got it. I think we're good. All right, here we go. Okay, so the reason we took a drink is because these aren't clams. They're not even fossils. They're concretions. So what's a concretion, you might ask? It's not a word that...
I would ask that. What is a concretion?
Right. So sedimentation and lithification can sometimes occur not just in horizontal planes, but around some kind of nucleus. This is sort of like how a raindrop forms, right? We have a lot of tiny microscopic raindrops. They don't tend to clump together unless there's a seed, right? Which is usually some kind of solid particulate. It's usually very small, but some water sort of gloms onto it. And then more water can glom onto that. Well, certain objects, especially fossils actually, so often concretions contain a fossil, but certain objects can also cause sediment to kind of glom onto them. And then it cements in circular, well, roughly circular layers around it. And so, in many cases, you can find these odd round stones that are eroding out of various strata. They're concretions. The things he's talking about are just large concretions. They're literally not even fossils. But we're just going to hit play because it's... Congrats, Kent. You couldn't tell the difference between a concretion and a fossil.
Closed. Well, first place, oysters, 11 foot, pretty big. What's the biggest ones alive today? Have you ever heard anything over 2 feet? Oysters?
I mean, the biggest clam is the geoduck, which is found in Puget Sound and looks for all the world like a gigantic penis with a shell on one end. It really, really does. You might think
it's like 2 feet long or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And when you pull it out of the water, a big stream for quite a while streams out the end of it, which doesn't really doesn't diminish the resemblance to a penis. To say that.
You live out in the ocean, or
I have eaten one. They are actually pretty tasty if you like clam. It's basically, it just tastes like clam. But I one. Yeah, I made some gooey duck stir fry. It was really good, actually.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time out there. 6-8 inches, yeah.
Well, I don't know about oysters, but that's pretty small for a clam once you consider the largest clam known. But okay.
Right. Yeah. I've seen shells of them at museums and stuff, 2 and 3 feet, you know, but still, 11 footers?
Which again, not even fossils, concretions.
2 miles above sea level? Well,
yes, but they're concretions. But also, that's actually marine deposition that's been pushed up as a result of things like, you know, two continental plates smashing into each other. Because he's actually talking about the Himalayas, in case you didn't know.
You know, clams don't climb mountains very well, for one thing.
I mean, they do underwater, but they don't have to, yeah. The sediment was already marine sediment with the concretions in it before it was pushed up into a mountain. And the thing is, Kent actually think, well, I don't know about Kent, right? But most creationists actually do think that mountains like the Himalayas were formed during the flood via plate tectonics. Kent seems to reject plate tectonics. I don't know why. It would make his life easier as a creationist, but whatever.
And when they die, they open.
DM for $5 says, AIG is a bag of well-prepared gooey ducks. I think he means bag, and we're going to take a drink. Thank you very much. DM Wing, I appreciate that one. It was pretty good. Also, you spelled gooey duck wrong. I know that's how it looks like it was spelled, but it's actually spelled like it would be like Geoduck, like it's some kind of a Pokemon.
Tesla Ranger said it correct, spelled it correctly.
Yeah, for some reason.
It's weird. It's not pronounced the way it's spelled. I don't know why.
Yeah, for some reason it's spelled like Geoduck, which sounds like the bastard offspring of Geodude and Psyduck from Pokemon first gen. But yeah, for some reason it's then pronounced Gooey Duck, and no, I don't know why.
I feel like Geoduck would be like the Darkwing Duck, but that focuses on like geography for kids.
That's just because you don't like Pokemon.
Well, they had Carmen San Diego.
All right, here we go.
Okay, John, the guy that brought us the petrified clams, they're out there in your fossil shop. About how many would you...
Okay, what does it even mean for a clam to be petrified? Its shell is already just stone. Okay, Vishanti says... I guess. Shanti says, Kent rejects plate tectonics because he subscribed to Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. You know, that makes sense. Except that he also says that the moon is unconcerned about the flood. So does he subscribe to hydroplate theory? Because he rejects certain parts of it, apparently. So I don't know. Kent is a very confusing fellow.
This has been a baffling episode.
It really has. That is a good word to describe it.
Guess you have there. Maybe a 500 to 1,000. Yeah, buckets and buckets of them. Get all we want. Yeah. We're going to start selling them in the bookstore. You know, pretty cheap. It's be a great witnessing tool to show somebody a petrified clam in the closed position.
All right, so real quick, we're going to talk a little bit about the ethics of private sale of fossils, and then we're going to start wrapping it up here. Okay, so generally speaking, you shouldn't buy or sell fossils. Fossils are inherently unique items. They are generally of scientific interest, and therefore, as a rule, should not generally be bought and sold. However, there are some fossils that are so commonplace that this presumption against the ethical sale and purchase can basically be overridden. Like most trilobites. Most trilobite species have thousands upon thousands of specimens, and the trilobite sample that you buy in a shop isn't going to miss any kind of scientific study that was going to be done on it, because there's more than enough for every scientific study that anyone wants to do on that particular trilobite. The same is true for belemnite shells. Belemites are cephalopods that you can find by the trillion, literally, in parts of the United States. There are some places where the ground is more belemite shell than it is anything else. If you want to buy a belemite shell, go ahead. There are also some other things there are some orthocone shells. They're just, or ammonite shells. They're just in such abundance in some places that it's fine. Just go ahead. Basically, if a real fossil, and you can verify that it's real, is under $10, chances are that no one is interested in it scientifically. That being said, maybe don't buy, millions of dollars on auction dinosaur skeleton. Instead, if you were inclined to do so, take that money and put it into the pool of a museum that's going to buy it and make it available for access by science. Because, as a rule, paleontology doesn't like to work on specimens that are privately held, because it can't be guaranteed that that work can be checked up on by subsequent workers. Because at any point, the owner of the fossil can just retract permission. Say, nope, no one can study it anymore. At that point, you can't repeat studies or do new studies on the same find. So that's the Dapper Dino general rule. If it's $10 or less, or if it's a much bigger sample of something that you can also buy individually for $10 or less, you're probably okay to buy it. It's probably not going to cause any problems for science or anything else. But if you're looking at something that's significantly more than that, consider whether or not your purchase is actually removing something from scientific study. And if you're still inclined to purchase it, I suggest that you then at least will it to a scientific establishment that is not privately held, so that it is permanently available for study, right? So I would suggest that you just purchase it for that institution if you're inclined to do so in the first place. But at the very least, make sure in your will it goes to such a place. Because one of the biggest tragedies is whenever such a find ends up not available for scientific study. One example that is particularly tragic is the Allosaurus, which has been dubbed Ebenezer, which is currently privately held by Answers in Genesis and is on display in the Creation Museum, because it is one of the most complete Allosaurus finds ever found. And while Allosaurus is admittedly one of the best studied theropods out there, so it's not like it's a completely unique find. It is an exceptional find, and it would be much better for the world if it were available for scientific scrutiny. Instead, it's not. and it is in fact privately held, basically by Ken Ham. Don't be Ken Ham. That's
lots of reasons not to be him. That's one of them.
That's one of them. All right, Bent, we're gonna wrap up. You got anything important?
Amazon wish list.
Yeah, Ben's as well as my Amazon wish lists are linked in the description, which are great options if you want to buy Bent a birthday present directly, or if you want to support me.
There's stuff in there for that.
Well, yeah. But or if you want to support me, there's a lot of stuff in there that would just help out either in the channel or in my daily life or in occasionally taking a break from the channel. Because so far I've been working from like 7 a.m. with like a 2-hour break in there, and that's about it. So yeah. If you want to help me relax, there's some relaxation stuff there. There's also some stuff that could help with the channel. Things like I could definitely use an upgrade to my graphics card. DM Wing for $10 says, "Happy birthday, Bent." Thank you very much, DM Wing. There's also stuff that would like just help around the kitchen. Like if you want to buy me a mortar and pestle so I can make like pesto or curry, feel free. If you don't, then just don't. Don't feel free.
I just want to put like a grocery gift card in my Amazon wish list. Because everything I have in there now is stuff to help with music, for making new music.
Well, that is a thing.
Not cheap stuff.
I'm not going to talk about it too much unless you want to talk about it more yourself. But you've been working on a lot of music recordings over the last few months, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So eventually, the plan is to have those go public, right?
Eventually, to finish them, yes. But a lot of it is demo home recording stuff, and so. But they're coming. Each song is coming out better than the previous as far as like quality. So getting more used to the software, and I have better software now. So there's really no timetable of any of it. But I think I've recorded more than half of it, at least for the demos. So it'd be easier if I had a drummer. I have to do all the drums myself, and I'm not very good.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, awesome. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up over on this channel, and also Top Hats Off. So Top Hats Off tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're doing Power Rangers Jungle Beasts. I am hoping that I can have 3 out of the 4 there. I've already been informed by one of my players that they probably can't make it, but I think everyone else is good. It'll be a slightly different group of people who were there than were there last time, but that's okay because all the characters were along. We're going to be doing the episode Sir Chevalier Part 2. This part might actually have Sir Chevalier in it, Let's see. On Thursday, the first episode of a series on Stephen Meyer is premiering at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Then on Saturday, there's almost certainly going to be something. I just don't know what it is. And yeah, that's going to wrap it up here. Guys, thank you very much. Once again, if you have money and you're willing, please do check out the channel memberships or the Patreon. It could really, really help, because while the channel has been in the black for most of 2022, this month it's almost certainly not going to be, which it's a little rough. So I would appreciate it if you can and if you want to. Other than that, we are out of here.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Bent Hovend, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Ian Chen, John Ackerman, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, McSpooks, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bede, and Patrick Dennis. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wishlist, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.